Sullivan. I met Michael when we came out here to meet with the staff of the Bay Area Pain and Wellness Center, and I also had a privilege of seeing him speak at the American Academy of Integrative Pain Management. And Michael was just extraordinary, and he really talks about a movement-based brain plasticity and really helping people without pain go through the physical and occupational therapy. And what struck me so much is it was the first time I heard him speak about, I don't move people, I convince them to move. And that for me was just, was epiphany. And I think that's so often I hear that I say, have you gone to a good therapist? Well, I've been through therapy. Well, you really have to vet who's going to treat you and who's going to help you try to get better. So Michael Sullivan is a doctor of physical therapy. He started working at PART as an interdisciplinary pain management team in 1997 with a focus on helping people with chronic pain in general and CRPS in particular to live more active lives. He's director of the Functional Restoration Program at the Bay Area Pain and Wellness Center, and it's really a pleasure to have him speak today.
Thank you. My purpose in life is to change the way that you think about your pain and to help you to recognize that the experiences that we've had in the past, the formative experiences that have trained us and have taught us what pain means, are no longer always serving us well, because the way that our brains change, the neuroplasticity that Dr. Abachi was talking about, those types of changes can lead our brain to give us incorrect information. It's our reality, it governs what's happening with our body, but it's not always serving us well. And what we want to do is we want to find ways that we can change our pain experience. And a big part of that is that we need to be able to redefine what does pain mean. Because when we talk about pain in terms of harm, it hurts. We're essentially equating pain with tissue damage. And that's not what pain is. Pain is our early warning system. It's there to protect us. When the nervous system is functioning properly, pain protects us. When the nervous system is no longer functioning properly, as what happens with CRPS, our pain is no longer protecting us. It's giving us lots of bad information. So when we go into treatment with our CRPS patients, the foundation of everything we do, what comes first, pain neuroscience education is our key, because we're going to be asking you to do things that hurt. And I want you to think about, we're going to be asking you to do things that are painful but not harmful. We want to rephrase the conversation. But everyone says, but Michael, that hurts. Yeah, I totally understand that. But we're not going to damage tissues. And we can fall back on our common sense oftentimes and go, when I touch my hand like this, it burns. But you look at your hand and you know that there's nothing burning your hand. Your brain doesn't know that. As far as your brain's concerned, you've activated a thermal pathway that's sending information up there that's saying something's burning my hand, something's burning my hand. Okay? And we know that it's not, but it feels exactly the same way. So how do we move past that? And there's a number of things that we do from the treatment standpoint to help people work through that. But starting with our pain neuroscience education, number one, pain and tissue damage are not synonymous. Okay? Number two, we all have the ability to modulate our pain level. We can turn the volume up or we can turn the volume down. A lot of the things that Dr. Abachi was talking about, things that turn the volume up on your pain level, catastrophic thinking, stress, okay? Even more so with CRPS, because with CRPS patients, the stress-pain connection actually gets stronger than it normally is, such that stress has a much greater response or a much greater impact on your body, okay? So we want to change the way that we respond to those stresses as well, which Thankfully, I work as part of a bigger team. And my team is key for me because they do a lot of the education of how do we calm down the nervous system. Because when we develop skills to calm down our nervous system, we change some of that hypersensitivity that we experience, okay? The other key for us is that you understand first, how does the normal nervous system function, okay? And there's a concept of, people tend to think about, well, yeah, I've got this pain signal coming up to my brain. And in reality, we don't. It's not pain until we process it in our higher centers. So there can be an event down here that activates a nociceptor. And this nociceptive process is that event gets changed into an electrical signal which travels up a nerve, goes to my spinal cord. My spinal cord can do some processing. And then that signal gets sent up to my brain. And my brain's got to decide how important is this information, or really the question it's asking itself is, how dangerous is this? And if your brain decides that what you're experiencing is very dangerous, it dials up the pain. And it's a survival response. People who don't sense pain, there's congenital disorders of people who don't sense pain, they don't live very long because they ignore all of this very important survival information. So one of the biggest challenges is we've gone through life, and what we've learned is that pain helps me to survive. Pain helps to keep me safe. It's telling me something's wrong. I need to avoid all those things. If we didn't, if there were no negative consequences to me putting my hand on a hot burner, I would never stop putting my hand on that. Well, no problem, I'll just grab that pot right off the stove. Right? So our brain teaches us things that we shouldn't do if we want to stay safe and survive. And now what I'm saying is you need to override all of that, right? So we're talking about a huge challenge, okay? So information comes up, this nociceptive information makes it up to my brain, and my brain says, how dangerous is this? And it scans all sorts of things in my brain. Past experiences. Have I ever felt something like this before? And if I did, what happened? What were the consequences? Okay? Cultural beliefs can be important in how we process pain. How were we raised? Were our early experiences with pain handled a certain way or handled a different way? Little kid's running across the playground, falls down, skins his knee. Mom goes running over and goes, oh, poor baby, are you okay? And then the next time the little kid goes running down the playground, skins his knee and looks up, oh, there's mom. Right? We get trained subconsciously to respond to pain in certain ways. Okay? And we want to be aware that we have the ability to change that. We have the ability to retrain our brain so that all of these past experiences, okay, can be reframed in a different way. We're not going to get it? Okay, I'll just keep going. So once we do that little search and our brain decides how dangerous is this for us, then we're into the modulation phase of how we manage our pain, okay? So yeah, I feel something like this every time I run. My quads hurt, I get a little stitch in my gut, not a big deal. Turn the volume down, we're not going to pay attention to it. It's not providing any useful information, so we don't process it, okay? Oh my God, the last time I felt that, I couldn't stand up straight or walk on my foot for like 6 months. Turn the volume way up on your pain, okay? This works really well with acute pain. And we talk about acute pain as being adaptive pain. Our response to acute pain is essential to our survival, okay? With complex regional pain syndromes, we're talking about chronic pain. Chronic pain is what we refer to as maladaptive pain. It's no longer serving a purpose, okay? I use with my patients the example of a car alarm. If my car alarm goes off in the middle of the night, I jump out of bed and I run outside and I look around. And, well, the car's fine, it's still locked, there's no one there, I go back to bed. 30 minutes later, my car alarm goes off again. I run outside, I look around, nothing, oh man. Turn it off, go back to bed. 30 minutes later, my car alarm goes off again. And I go, oh. I trudge outside, I reset it. Eventually, I need to figure out that my car alarm doesn't work. It's not providing me useful information. And wouldn't it be nice if we could just turn off the non-useful information that our brain is processing? But that's where our challenge lies, okay? So there's been a lot of studies in the last 10 to 12 years on different ways to approach the physical rehabilitation of a complex regional pain syndrome. So once you understand, hey, this is how my normal nervous system works, then we want to talk in context of your specific symptoms. How is your nervous system functioning differently? Okay. Some people have sympathetic changes. Not everybody does, which is why they don't call it RSD anymore. Okay. Some people don't. Some people have warm, dry, red hands. Some people have cold, sweaty, blue hands. Okay? Because some people have not enough sympathetic activity. Some people have too much sympathetic activity. Okay? Some people have allodynia. Dr. Bacci mentioned that. Pain with non-painful stimuli. Light touch shouldn't cause pain. The wind blowing on my ankle shouldn't make my ankle burn. What's happening there? Our nervous system, when it's getting bombarded with nociceptive information, this information about potential harm, nociceptive information isn't related to just actual harm. My nervous system gets bombarded by that. It starts to get sensitized. It gets sensitized at the spinal cord level, whereby the stimulus creates a response that's in much greater intensity and lasts for a longer duration than what we want it to. That's called central windup. And then it'll send messages back down to the receptors themselves and start to change the receptor thresholds such that things that shouldn't be painful have the ability to activate that same system because the thresholds are no longer accurate. Okay? And then this information goes up and it bombards my brain and it starts to create maladaptive changes in my brain. So when we talk about neuroplasticity, it can go both ways. We could get great growth and interconnectivity, or we can get alterations that are negative to have negative consequences for how we function. And what we focus on the most with our physical rehabilitation is the somatosensory cortex. The somatosensory cortex is a map in your brain that receives all of this information. And we can see in functional magnetic resonance imaging studies, if I push a pin in your finger, a little spot will appear of activity in that area of the map in the brain where the finger is represented. After the brain gets bombarded with nociceptive information for long periods of time, the somatosensory cortex starts to change. It starts to smudge, is the word that they use for it. That area of representation for the finger starts to get bigger, and now it's the hand. And in some cases, because of the way the maps lay it out, it's not just the hand, but I start to feel stuff in my face, itchy sensations, because they're next to each other on the map. That's one of the ways that our pain can spread. Okay? It also leads us to lose fine discrimination. We're no longer able to feel things in our hands properly anymore. I can't pick up a marble. It doesn't feel right. Okay? Dr. Bacci spoke a little bit about changes in our body perception. Okay? When our somatosensory cortex gets impaired and starts to have this process going on, it no longer provides us accurate information about what state our body is in. And I'll have patients go, look how swollen my hands are. And I look at them and I'm like, wow, they look fine. You know, I don't see any swelling. That's not what their brain's telling them. Their brain is telling them that my limb is heavy and swollen. And we do a little experiment where I say, hold your hand like this, and what I want you to do is touch as close as you can to it without actually touching your skin. And people who have intact body maps, intact body schema, will be just a hair away from touching themselves. And then our CRPS patients will go, Because as far as their brain is concerned, that's how big their limb is. That it's giving inaccurate information. There's tons of great experiments that have demonstrated we have the ability to trick the brain into believing things that aren't true. And in doing so, we have the ability to induce pain with non-painful experiences. We can make it worse or we can make it better based on how we process that information. So we know tricking the brain is something that's possible. Okay? So what are we going to do for treatment? We want to trick the brain in a good way. Okay? We want to stimulate that somatosensory cortex in a way that helps us to function better. So all of my information about how I move, my premotor cortex, which plans movement for me, gets feedback from my somatosensory cortex. It gives me information about the state of my body. What position am I in? I don't need to look at my arms to know they're straight out at my sides. Okay? My brain gets that information. If I got CRPS, nope, not anymore. Okay? That can become affected, which then means my movement plan is no longer accurate. My brain thinks I've got a heavy limb and doesn't know what position my joint is in. My somatosensory cortex gets separated. There's incongruency between the way my body is, the way my brain thinks my body is, and then that affects my ability to plan movement. Okay? That can be manifested as tremors when I try and do things, loss of motor control, dystonia, all sorts of movement patterns can get messed up through that process. Okay? So we use a program called graded motor imagery. And this was started in 2000, well, part of it was started in 2005. The Neuroorthopedic Institute, Lorimer Moseley in particular was doing most of the research at that time. And he was working with David Butler, who's an educator. And they put together a program of how do we deal with these pain problems. And graded motor imagery has 3 parts to it. It starts off with what's called left-right discrimination. It's a laterality task. You look at pictures. I look at a picture of a left hand, I got to identify it as a left hand. I look at a picture of a right hand, I have to identify it as a picture of a right hand. I need to do this quickly and I need to do it accurately. And what we see is with people who've got changes in that area of their brain, they can't. They're great with the right hands, they're awful with the left hands because their right hand's the affected extremity. They're great with the left foot, they're awful with the right foot because their right foot is their affected extremity. So changes in that area of the brain start to create this incongruency, and when we retrain laterality, that area of the brain starts to get healthier. And they've shown that the smudging in the somatosensory map actually starts to change, okay? In a positive way. It starts to revert back to normal. And what happens when that happens? We have less pain. So extensive review of the literature. Best way to, the best technique for CRPS and pain reduction is graded motor imagery. Okay? So after the laterality tasks, we go into imagined movements. Okay? So there's a series of images again. You look at the image and you imagine your hand being in that position, or you imagine your foot being in that position. And as part of that exercise, you're actually rotating pictures in your brain, which is almost like rotating limbs in your brain. And we see just as much activity in the premotor, in the motor cortex, as if you were actually moving, okay? Without the negative consequences of moving, which for most people is increased pain. I have more pain when I move. Okay? We want to change that experience. So these imagined movements then go from just stimulating the sensory areas to stimulating the sensory and motor areas. And then our third one is mirror therapy. And mirror therapy was actually started in, I think it's 1995 by Ramachandran. And what they were doing was working with amputees, working with stroke patients. And it involves putting your affected limb in a box where you can't see it. And the first thing we do is we look at, if this was my affected limb and it's in the box, I'm looking at a mirror reflection of my good limb, and it looks normal, and my brain goes, man, my right hand looks good, because it can't see it, okay? That, without movement at all, can help to change that somatosensory cortex. And then when we add movement on top of it, and we always start with, are there any movements you can do that don't hurt? Yeah, I can do this, but I can't do this. Well, we're not going to do this, okay? We're going to start with this, and you're going to look at it, and you're going to see all this movement. This is a sequential process. Laterality leads to imagined movement, leads to mirror therapy, but it doesn't always work that way for everybody, okay? We actually have, Lucrezia's got a table set up in the back. We have these tools if you want to look at them. We've got a mirror box back there. We've got some laterality tasks. They're not toys. They can make your pain worse, okay? There's a lack of agreement on how do we do, if it were cookie cutter, if it was following a recipe, everybody could do the same thing and get better. But as you know, everybody's got different symptoms. Everybody's got a different experience. And so the treatment needs to vary based on what you need. So some people will say, never let this hand move when that one, the hidden one, isn't. Because in about 15% of the population, including people with healthy nervous systems, if I put them in the box and I have them do this for 5 minutes, their hand will start to hurt, a hand that doesn't have any pain. Because I've now created an incongruence between my movement system and my sensory system. Because my brain's not getting feedback that my hand's moving, but my brain's being told that my hand's moving. And that incongruence can create pain. Okay? So there isn't one right way to do it. It's for everybody a little bit different. How do we find a progression that's going to help you? Okay? Desensitization activities and kind of a focus on textures can help to reduce allodynia through decreasing the hypersensitivity in those nerve endings and those nociceptors and creating some changes in the somatosensory cortex. So we start with like cotton, but it burns, okay? What do I do if it hurts? Well, my answer to that is if an hour after you stop doing it, your pain hasn't changed, then we did too much, okay? Or if you can't do tomorrow what we did today, then you did too much. Okay. So what we want to avoid is, so this is a centralized pain syndrome for everybody. There's centralized changes. Allodynia is the hallmark of centralized pain syndromes. So that means we get changes in the spinal cord and the brain with these things. Okay. We don't want to aggravate that. We don't want to get it wound up, because if we wind it up, it runs longer. Okay. So what we want to do, and what we encourage people to do at home, and it doesn't fit really well with the standard physical therapy model, I want you to do activities 5 minutes a day, 8 to 10 times a day. I don't care what the activity is. I don't care if you're doing laterality, and then your next 5 minutes is going to be mirror box, and your next 5 minutes is going to be working on your range of motion. Okay? But in short spells, we can retrain our bodies. Okay? So other things that we can do, aerobic exercise is key. Dr. Abachi talked about the glial cells. Glial cells, in particular microglia, are very important with the health of our nervous system. A little bit's a good thing. Too much, very bad thing. And with CRPS patients, there's 2 common genetic markers that we see that lead to huge amounts of glial cell microglial activation that we don't want. Okay? The only thing in physical therapy that we can do about that, aerobic exercise. Early animal studies demonstrate that aerobic exercise will downregulate microglial activity. The doctors will tell you other things. There's other tools to do this. It's probably the forefront of new therapies coming out. How do we change this microglial activity? Right now, the only thing I got for you, aerobic exercise. If your disease is in your feet, you're going to exercise with your arms. If your disease is in your arms, you're going to exercise with your feet. Okay? Anything that gets your heart rate up counts. Anything. All right? So aerobic activity is good. Okay. Big take-home message, we're treating two different things. We're treating the changes in your central nervous system as a result of the disease, and then we need to treat the orthopedic problems that are a result of your injury or a result of the immobility as a result of your disease. Okay? If we ignore the orthopedic problems, what ends up happening is as our disease process gets better and we get in better control and we're able to modulate it and I'm ready to move again, now I got a hand that won't move anymore because I've got orthopedic restrictions. Unfortunately, most physical therapists start with the orthopedic problems. It doesn't work. You need to have some success with tools to help to decrease your pain before we ask you to do things that we know that are going to really hurt. Okay? And that's where, for us, the whole team comes into play, is you're learning, how do I calm down my nervous system? How do I change the way I think about my pain? Relaxation, meditation exercises, yoga activities. All of these things play a role in this calming down the nervous system, because when our nervous system quiets down, we have less discomfort. Okay? But not moving is not an option. If we don't move, our joints don't get good joint lubrication, okay? Which means they don't get good nutrition, and they can develop all kinds of contractures, whereby then when we're able to move, our joints are going to be like, nope, not going to go there. Our muscles get weaker, which means they're easier to overload, which means they're more likely to cause pain. And if we don't use them, they can get fibrotic, and we can get permanent changes in our muscles that, oh, that muscle's not going to lengthen anymore. Okay? So all kinds of changes. The Spanish Inquisition, 700 years ago, they got really good at torturing each other, people did, in the name of certain beliefs. Okay? One of the most powerful forms of torture was to tie people up into a position where they couldn't move. That was it. That's all you had to do. A day later, they would admit to killing their mother if she was sitting right there in the room. Okay? Because not moving is incredibly painful. Anyone who's ever had a cast on or been immobilized knows that you get pain in joints that weren't injured and areas that weren't injured as a result of immobilization. But when everything hurts, we immobilize ourselves. Great for an acute pain problem because it gives our body time to heal. Really bad for a chronic pain problem because it actually leads to increased sensitization, increased pain, and negative consequences for all the tissues in our body. So I want to encourage you to first find some things that help you to manage well. The graded motor imagery is a great start. Look at the Neuro-Orthopedic Institute. Look at the RSDSA website. All kinds of great resources on there. Lorimer Mosley's done a piece for them. There's all sorts of good stuff on there. Dr. Abachi's book is great. You can buy a graded motor imagery book, but be careful. Find somebody, so the next time you're getting ready to do physical therapy, ask them, hey, are you familiar with graded motor imagery? If they say yeah, you're probably in a good place right off the bat because they're on top of what's been going on. Okay. Sorry I didn't have any pictures for you. Thank you for your time.
Michael,
yeah.
What happens when they have bilateral CRPS? Could they do mirror box therapy?
So Jim asked if it's okay to do mirror box therapy with bilateral CRPS. And I'm going to probably jump through the mirror box at you and say virtual reality is going to be the way to go. So virtual reality is like mirror box on steroids, because you're watching your hand reach out and do things that your hand can't do. And so instead of having two affected limbs and not one to mirror off of. We've got a healthy limb, and it may actually be a representation of our own healthy limb that we can look at and use that to trick the brain. And there's actually someone here today who's got a virtual reality platform. And I do think it's going to be a future of a lot of the things that we do.